Hello everyone, welcome back to Bridge is for Everyone. My name's Jad. This is episode 4 of the Learn to Play workshop series. This episode explains the relationship between scoring and the tactics which you can employ for best results. Each tactic will be described and then explained with examples. Let's look at the first tactic. I describe this as no game, stop fast. This means if you know you don't have enough strength for a game contract, then stop the bidding fast to keep the contract as low as possible. This tactic applies as soon as you know the strain you will be playing. Let's use some examples to see why this works. This is example 1. The strain is diamonds. You know from the previous episode that in diamonds, each contract trick is worth 20 points. So unless the contract is doubled, you need 5 contract tricks to reach the 100 necessary for game. If you bid and make this contract, you will also score a game bonus. This will result in a total score of 400 or more. Now let's look at the situation where you don't have enough strength to play a game contract. You'll recall from the previous episode that unless the contract is doubled, an over trick is worth the same as a contract trick. This means that, provided you make your contract, the score for a contract of 1 diamond, 2 diamonds, 3 diamonds, or 4 diamonds are exactly the same if you make the same number of tricks. The only difference between these contracts is the risk of failure. The higher the contract, the higher the risk of failure. So the best tactic is to stop in the lowest diamond contract possible as soon as you know that you can't play 5 diamonds. The situation is identical if the strain is clubs, the other minor suit. If you can't play 5 clubs, stop in clubs as fast as possible. If the strain is spades, the same principle applies, but the levels are different. Each contract trick is worth 30 points, so a game needs only 4. If you can't play 4 spades, then stop in spades as fast as possible. And of course, the situation is the same for hearts, the other major suit. If you can't play 4 hearts, stop in hearts as fast as possible. Finally, let's consider no trump. No trump requires only 3 contract tricks. The first scores 40 and the next 2 score 30 each, for a total of 100, exactly what is needed for game. So, if you can't play 3 no trump, stop in no trump as fast as possible. Tactic 2 is a direct extension of Tactic 1. If you have enough for a game contract, but not enough for a slam contract, then stop at game. Let's look at an example. This is example 2. The strain is spades. The contract is 5 spades and you make 11 tricks. For contract tricks, you make 5 at 30 each, for a score of 150. This is sufficient to gain a game bonus of 300 or 500. The total score is therefore 450 or 650, depending on vulnerability. Now consider winning the same 11 tricks in the less risky contract of 4 spades. Once again, unless the contract is doubled, The over trick score is the same as the contract trick score, so the total trick score is still 150. And of course, the game bonus is the same, so the total score is an identical 450 or 650 depending on vulnerability. So with a spade contract, you should avoid 5 spades unless a slam is possible. If the strain is hearts, the situation is identical. You should avoid 5 hearts unless a slam is possible. When looking to play a no-trump contract, this tactic can be extended. Unless you are looking for a slam, avoid bids of 4 no-trump or 5 no-trump. In the case of minor suits, diamonds or clubs, this tactic is not needed. This is because there are no relevant bids. Game is at the 5 level and slam is at the 6 level, so there are no intermediate bids. Tactic 3 looks at a different aspect of the game. It is concerned with making a sacrifice. A sacrifice bid is where you make a bid that you know will probably be defeated. When assessing a sacrifice bid, you look at the balance of scores between your opponents making a contract and you losing a contract. Let's look at a specific example. This is example 3. West deals and opens the bidding with 1 heart. Partner bids 2 spades, and East bids 4 hearts. It's your turn to bid. You have a choice between passing and allowing your opponents to play 4 hearts or bidding 4 spades. Your hand is weak, so you cannot expect to make a contract of 4 spades. But this still might be the best thing to do. Let's look at the factors you should consider when contemplating a sacrifice. First, you should have very little defense against your opponent's contract. And second, given the vulnerability, the likely scoring should be favourable to you. Let's see what this means. First, let's look at the possible scores for your opponents if they make their contract. If they are not vulnerable, then making the contract exactly will score 420. And if they are vulnerable, they will score 620. Now let's look at what happens if you play a sacrificial 4 spades. If you make a sacrifice bid, you should expect to be doubled. So we will look at scores for failing doubled contracts. The scores vary with vulnerability and how badly you fail. If you are vulnerable, then the scores are 200, 500 and 800 for 1 down, 2 down and 3 down. If you are not vulnerable, then the scores are 100, 300 and 500 for 1 down, 2 down and 3 down. Now let's compare the 2 sets of scores. You can clearly see where the penalty from your sacrifice is less than the score your opponents would receive for making their contract. Let's summarise this in a table. First, the best possible situation, favourable vulnerability. You are not vulnerable and your opponents are vulnerable. You can afford to go down by 3 tricks and still be ahead. But if the vulnerability is equal, both vulnerable or both not vulnerable, then you can only afford to go down by 2 tricks. And with unfavourable vulnerability, you can only afford to fail by 1 trick. In all these cases, if you are likely to fail by more tricks, you should not sacrifice. You should just pass. So far, the sacrifices discussed have all been against game contracts. Against part game contracts, sacrifices are rarely viable, and I do not recommend them. The related topic, competitive auctions, will be discussed elsewhere on this channel. Against slam contracts, the score and penalties can be much greater. There are some very rare circumstances where a sacrifice against a slam is viable, but they are best avoided by less experienced players. Now let's look at Tactic 4. Tactic 4 considers the dangers of a double into game. Let's look at an example. This is example 4. East opens with 1 spade. You have a poor hand and pass. West bids 2 spades, partner doubles, and East passes. It's your turn to bid. In the Learn to Play series, you were told to bid in this situation. But let's look at what could happen if you pass. West will pass to end the auction. The contract is 2 spades doubled by East. Let's calculate the score if East makes the contract exactly. Because the contract is doubled, the contract trick score is doubled for each trick. So 2 contract tricks gives a total of 120. This is more than the 100 required for a game contract, so game bonuses apply. This will be 300 or 500 depending on vulnerability. And of course there will be a 50-point bonus for the insult. So the total score for making 8 tricks is 470 or 670 depending on vulnerability. If the same contract was not doubled, the score would have been 110. The lesson here is, do not let your opponents play a contract with a double into game. All bids of 2 hearts or more become game contracts if they are doubled. This is why, if your partner doubles into game, you must bid. The situation is even worse for redoubled contracts. All bids of 1 heart or more become game contracts if they are redoubled. Now let's look at score-related Tactic 5. Tactic 5 is quite different. It requires you to look at one specific situation. The score for 3 no trump compared to 4 of a major. I will use the example of 4 hearts, but the discussion also applies to 4 spades. We start by assuming that declarer can win 10 tricks exactly in either contract. Vulnerability is not relevant, so let's assume declarer is not vulnerable. The basic score for 3 no trump is 430, and the basic score for 4 hearts is 420. This would seem to make 3 no trump a winner, but this is not always the case. Under match point scoring, 3 no trump is better. It will gain a full match point over those who play 4 hearts. But under imp scoring, a difference of 10 in the basic scores is 0 imps. So both contracts are scored the same. You should choose the appropriate contract for your hand. So, in match point scoring, should you prefer no trump? No trump is generally considered harder to play, especially for less experienced players. This is why I recommend that you prefer a major suit contract over no trump. No trump needs 1 less trick and will score better if you make 10 tricks. But if you fail your contract or only win 9 tricks, it will score less. I recommend you stick with the system taught in the Learn to Play series. This episode looked at the main tactical implications of the bridge scoring system. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing to this channel. Until next time, this is Jad reminding you that bridge is for everyone.